Competition has always pushed me to perform well, with the end goal of college and success. However, competition can push people too far. In an attempt to explain this, we've interviewed people who we believe understand this the best. I think that Saugatuck has strong academic competition for a select few students, but I don't feel that overall there's a lot of academic competition for the entirety of a grade. However, some grades differ. Some grades are much more academically competitive. Personally, I know it's like I have one or two people that I'm very competitive with, and I constantly want to get better test scores and better grades than them, but that's more of a personal thing. I don't know if they have the same feelings.
So for me personally, it was great because then I had a lot of competition to drive me forward in class, and as well as just keep me on my toes and also be able to share experiences with other students, because everyone in my classes were those high-flying, highly competitive kids that were striving to go towards college and universities. So the challenges that came along with that allowed me to also push myself. There, I believe it affected me negatively in the sense that you learn to just test, and study for a test. No life skills were really being taught, and you weren't gaining any life experiences.
When we had just those one spots that students were more competitive because they wanted to nail that spot and have that kind of crown, or be able to say I was the valedictorian of my class. And we changed that because I think it was because there was some unhealthy competition, and we know we have a broad population that is both academically strong. Some students, they test really well, so we use a formula where they take whether it's their highest ACT score or highest SAT score, and then there is a formula that is used. Dr. Travis does those calculations, and it's kind of a standard calculation that most schools use. With those, there's a cutoff point within that system. Every class is going to look a little different. It's certainly nice to kind of continue to raise the bar, and but also it's really important when it's not healthy. People can do things. For example, it would be, you could take some, maybe what some people would call easier classes and ace those classes. However, we have another population just really cares about their education, maybe wants to get some college credit, and maybe they're getting B's instead of A's. And some people can be so focused on that GPA that there's not this contrast between the two, where it needs to be a healthy balance. So that would be a negative competition when you operate that system.
I think the Senior Scholar is better. I know Dr. Travis says this all the time, but I do agree that I like the Senior Scholar better, because there's definitely people in my grade who have a higher unweighted GPA than I do, but then only took really basic class, or they took the classes, or they took journalism 7 times, and it's okay, I mean, I was taking classes at Hope, so I mean, if I ruined my I didn't ruin it, but if I lowered my GPA because of that, like, it's not really fair that they can take the same elective more than once and get perfect scores and get a 4.0 when I like actually applied myself more. So I think it's better because it like allows kids to take harder classes and then they still get rewarded. Like, they still get rewarded for what they accomplished.
Most students are not taught well to handle stress in elementary school or middle school. There isn't no stress management class. And so by the time you reach high school, if you don't have some sort of biological switch in yourself to handle that stress in an adequate manner, in a healthy way, then it can definitely lead to mental illnesses. There are different types of intelligences, and so how people react based on their academic challenges can ultimately cause different mental illnesses if they're not prepared for those types of competition in school.
I've never met someone who's been valedictorian or who's been one of the top people in their class who hasn't suffered from something. I get really bad anxiety that I never had before high school, before tests, especially during standardized tests. Just because, again, I feel like if you want to be the type of student that is going to be able to get into Stanford or Harvard or Princeton or any Ivy, any competitive school, you have to hold yourself to a very high standard, and that's very hard to consistently hit. And so I think that you have such a high expectation for yourself that when you don't meet it, it can be very traumatizing, and I think it can be very upsetting. So I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I got a B and a B plus my freshman year, and it destroyed me. It sounds so pathetic, but it was because I wasn't perfect enough, and I was thinking, if I get a B now, there's no way down the line that anyone's gonna let me in, and that's not true. I mean, I think that I was so obsessed with perfection that I didn't even think. I mean, you are a human being. You can't be perfect. No human can be perfect. But I think that you get this in your mind that all of these people who are getting into these schools are just perfect, and that's not true. I mean, they don't expect you to be perfect either. So you just have to kind of get out of that mindset.
Well, I think Princeton students are some of the most depressed I've ever been around. I think maybe there's a difference between competition and pressure. So like super high pressure in general environment, and there are a lot of kids that were unhappy both because they felt like they had to do something that they didn't necessarily enjoy, and because it was hyper competitive. So yeah, it was. I talked to Van Jones, who was this like big political commentator. He's like, I've never met a bunch of kids that needed more medication than when I was teaching at Princeton. Achievement doesn't always equal happiness. I feel like people need to experience the world and like get out of a bubble. Like, no one really cares what your GPA is. No one, like, happiness does not come from like making a ton of money on Wall Street. I think that the people that get most trapped into these cycles of competition like have a very limited understanding of what the world has to offer. So experiencing things because you're interested and curious about them and passionate about them, and considering different perspectives other than a very narrow focus is helpful. There's a big difference between like competing with yourself and trying to be the best that you can be, and like trying to beat other people. So like, if I think, being curious about the world and trying to be the best at something that you could be is super healthy. Like, purely trying to beat someone else is not. Like, that won't lead to happiness or success, probably. Grades are important, but they don't really matter in life. Like, I would say focus on learning and the grades come, but like, do things that you're interested in, not because it's going to make your resume look better, have a better GPA. This is not directly related to competition, but I think you see, I mean, at places like Princeton, people are trying to take like the hardest classes and get the best grades, and they're not actually saying, what am I interested in? And in the long term, like, you'll learn more about and get better at things that you care about. Even like, so I've done a bunch of like interviews of high school students that are applying to Princeton, and I mean, there are a lot of them that clearly have just filled their resumes with things that look good, rather than like doing things that they really care about.
I think when you are faced with that higher academic environment, whether it be here at Saugatuck High School or when you go on to college, I think the focus always should be to be balanced. Some students are able to carry a tough load and get A's, but they work really hard for that, and that is really important to them. So, you know, it's really looking at your own values, what's important to you, to guide you to reach whatever goals you have. So I think if you concentrate on that, you'll be a lot happier person.
I think we need to emphasize more on stress management with the competition, as well as group work with other peers. Obviously, the current education system strongly pushes group work and working in teams in order to solve problems, but the problem with that is that students are then not taught how to divvy up work equally. Usually when you do a project, someone always ends up doing the work by themselves, while others kind of are on the sidelines. And while that can ultimately lead to a good project sometimes, the problem is that students don't learn how to work in groups. Rather, they learn how to push responsibilities off to other people. And another thing is that when there is competition, usually those who are highly motivated are the ones ending up doing all the work, and those who tend to be more stressed by competition either give up, and therefore they don't achieve as highly as they could be doing, or they basically fall into mental illness, because then they're stressed out by their work and they develop anxiety about like upcoming tests, upcoming projects. And so being able to teach students how to manage stress and how to work in groups effectively would ultimately benefit students in general. That's what I would offer to change.
I think if we put less pressure on like getting good grades and focus more on just learning the material, which I know this has like been a big topic for a long time, but I feel like if there is such a high pressure on grades and test scores and having just like the highest GPA, you know, people aren't actually learning anything, and then you're so stressed out about beating your classmates and you're not gonna actually do any well, and like you're not gonna do well in college because you don't know how to learn really. You're just trying to get good grades, and that's not a good. It pushes you to do better than you might if you didn't have that external like force, I guess.
I do think some competition is necessary. It can be very healthy. So I think it's just really important to just be in tune with that.
Yeah, some level of competition is definitely necessary, because without competition there could be no progress. If everyone was just happy with the way things are, and then there is no motivation to get somewhere better.
I started high school thinking that I would play soccer in college. I ended up running. I studied politics, wrote a thesis on prison policy, moved to Detroit to do architecture, and started a clothing company. You never know where you'll end up.